Good evening and welcome to 365 Days of Amazing Stories with Theo Mayer. Here we are on day 50, and I'm going to be finishing the story of Angulimala the Robber. The Buddha had met him on that road through the forest and walked on ahead of him. Angulimala had run after him as hard and fast as he could, but could not catch the Buddha, even though the Buddha was simply going at a walk. Finally, Angulimala gave up, and he said, "Whoever you are, what are you doing? How can you have done this?" And he was in despair. And the Buddha said, "While I have stopped, you have not." Angulimala. The Buddha had continued to walk even as he was talking to Angulimala, and Angulimala had stopped, panting, sweating, his sides feeling like they were going to burst because he had run so hard. He said, "How can this be?" The Buddha replied, "I have stopped harming while you have not." And this veil was lifted from Angulimala, and he immediately saw all of his errors and misjudgments. He saw what he had been doing, and he felt horror-stricken. He fell into the road, his weapons clattering about around him, right there in the dust. And the Buddha asked him if he would like to leave this life he had been living. Angulimala said, "Yes, I would." The Buddha said to follow him. Angulimala said, "No, you must send for the king and have me punished. I must be slain for what I have done." The Buddha said, "Patience, patience, there will be time for that. Rise now and follow me," the Buddha said. Angulimala agreed. He followed the Buddha. He became a monk. As a monk, he had an amazing power. It was found that if there was a woman in childbirth and was having difficulty, she was exhausted from trying to give birth to her child, all she would need to have happen is to be brought into the company of Angulimala, and everything would flow so easily. It's like water flowing downhill in a stream. The child would be born. Angulimala had the same effect on animals. Struggling animal could be brought before him. The same thing would take place. It would give birth to a healthy young one quite easily. Well, despite this gift that Angulimala had, when he would go into town and do his begging, bowl in hand, many would flee when he was coming. Others would turn their backs. Others would shut their doors as he was walking by. Angulimala himself could not forget what he had done. He was tormented by images, often in dreams. He could see the faces of those he had slain, reaching out to him, begging for mercy. "I have a son. What will my grandmother do? Wait, I have a family. Please, no." In every which way, people pleaded for their lives, but without compassion. Angulimala had slain them. He could not forget this. He could not let it go. He could not forgive himself for having done these things, and tortured he was. He would go to the Buddha and share what was going on, and the Buddha would say, "Patience, have patience. We have but just a little time to live. And this we must do in earnest. Have patience. Angulimala did. He would help those he could. And each day he would go in to the village, Sarvasti, where he had grown up. Ahimsaka, as Ahimsaka, the harmless one. He would beg there and then return. One day, he was there, and as was always the case, some ran, some turned their backs on him, some shut their doors. But often, women with nursing babies would come out and give him a piece of fruit or some rice, some doll. But this day, Ahimsaka, just as he was getting to the village, was struck down. His robes torn off his body, his begging bowl shattered. For in that moment, every rock that had been thrown at a mangy dog, every whip that had been used on an animal cruelly, every weapon that had been used against another person violently, suddenly found its way down Angulimala. He was struck down by all of these weapons all at once, until even the fingers in his hands were broken. He was bleeding in so many places. In great pain and agony, he gathered his robes up about him and painfully made his way back to the Buddha, falling there in front of him in the dust. The Buddha said, now is the time for great patience. Now is the time that you have made atonement for all of those errors that you made. Now is the time when you will gain your greatest freedom. Well, with this, Ahimsaka, the harmless one, for that is who he truly was, he embodied a great determination. He did not let hope, nor grief, nor fear have a grip on him. He allowed his mind to let go of all those images that came flooding to him now. All those dreams that he had been having night after night, he let them go. Let them go. He let it all go. Until his mind reached a depth that he had never experienced before. And for a brief moment, then, he experienced that divine bliss, nirvana. And in those seconds, he cried out, "Weaker men overcome with weapons, swords and spears and bows. But I have been overcome by the Buddha, who needs none of that to be victorious." And with that, Ahimsaka took in a breath and another, and peacefully passed on there at the feet of the Buddha. A cool wind blew through the trees of Sarvasti, and it said that once again, the weapons, having returned to their place on walls and in scabbards, glinted again, but this time with a cleansing light. And there is the end of the story, Angulimala the Robber. Now, I might say as in closing that, all of us, perhaps, Maybe there are some that don't, but all of us have this robber within us. We slay without mercy to fulfill our desires, sometimes our needs. Our egos tell us that it's important to do so. We deserve to do so. We deserve to have what we want and what we need. And it can push us to doing things that are dishonest, are like thievery, even if in our mind we can justify having done them. It does not make it right. Like dropping a stone into a still pond, the waves, they radiate out from that dropping stone, eventually hit the shore, and then come back to where the stone was dropped. In the same way, our deeds, they create an effect, and eventually the results of our deeds return. Thus it is that in great books, it's said that the wise man is not moved by gain or loss, good fortune or bad fortune, because he or she sees it for what it is. Okay, we'll leave this story here. Tomorrow we'll pick up another one. I have, I think, one or two more from the Buddha's life. Okay, have a good rest of your day or evening.